So what happened in that one apparition of Our Lady of Pontmain? Well, first it's important to remember that the parish priest had been preparing the people, had been trying to restore the faith in this small country parish after the French Revolution. The faith had been devastated in this area. And what he did was he redid the church. He tried to get the people to pray, tried to get the people to be formed and to understand their faith. And inside the church, on the ceiling of the church, he had painted a blue sky with stars. And the people had been surprised at that. But what he wanted them to think is when we're praying, we're close to heaven. Now, when Our Lady of Pontmain appeared, she appeared with a blue veil, a long blue dress with stars. So it was familiar to the people. They weren't afraid when they saw her. Also, he had a number of images of Our Lady in the church because he was very influenced by St. Louis de Montfort. And so there was an oval around one of those images of Our Lady, and there was an oval behind Our Lady when she appeared. Again, very close to what they were familiar with in their parish. Also, her hands were extended in a sort of an inviting gesture to the people to not be afraid. And again, it was very much like they had in their church. There was an image of Our Lady with her hands extended. I'm standing in front of the beautiful basilica, which was built here over an empty field. What happened in the apparitions, there was a family here. One of their older sons was away at war, and the father was working in a barn with his young children. A woman came to bring some news of the war, and one of the little children came outside. It was January 17th, 1871. And they had seen the aurora borealis in the sky on January 11th, and the father had said that's a sign from heaven. So the boy came out in the cold night air at 6 o'clock at night to see if there was a sign of the aurora borealis again. And instead, he saw this woman with a blue dress, stars on her dress, a long black veil, a crown on her head with a red band, and she had a beautiful smile on her face. He felt great joy at seeing the lady, but it seemed the lady was even more joyful to see him. He went inside and told his father. The father came out, didn't see anything, and he thought the son was lying. And they kept going back and forth. He had to go to dinner. They finally found out was the adults could not see Our Lady, but the children could. So they eventually called the priest. They prayed. They eventually called a sister, and 2 other girls came who were in the school. They also confirmed the presence of Our Lady. And so the apparition went on for the course of 3 hours. And during these 3 hours, the aspect of Our Lady changed. Sometimes she smiled. Sometimes she seemed very joyful. At times they prayed, and Our Lady grew in stature. She was very attentive to their prayers. At times they sang, and when they sang, she seemed very joyful, and her hands moved as if she was praying and interceding for them, because the prayer that they were singing was asking Our Lady to intercede for them. And then a very interesting thing had happened. 2 nights before the apparitions, the priest had brought the people into the chapel to pray. And he had asked them to sing the song, Our Lady of Hope, and the people loved that song. But they weren't able to pray or sing that night because they were so forsaken and so downcast, and they said, God does not hear and answer our prayers anymore. Now, when Our Lady came, Our Lady of Pontmain came, she did not say anything. She was silent the whole time. She was smiling at them, she was encouraging them with her gestures, but she never said a word. But there was kind of a scroll that came out, and it unfolded word by word. And what Our Lady said to them was, but you must pray, because God will hear your prayers, and Jesus, his son, will allow himself to be touched by these prayers. And so there was some question when people saw these words, but, how can you start something with but? But it's obvious that what Our Lady is doing is she's responding to the question of the people in the church. God doesn't hear our prayers anymore. Is it worth praying? And Our Lady is saying, but you must pray, because God will hear your prayers. And he does answer these prayers. Later on, during the apparitions, Our Lady became more serious. A crucifix appeared on her, a red crucifix, and it said the words Jesus Christ over it. And the red, I think, is a symbol of the blood, of the war, the violence, the difficulties that were going on at that time. There were also 4 candles at times. There were many different aspects of the apparitions that were very symbolic and reminded the people of their church. And finally, over the course of the 3 hours, finally the lady disappeared, and it only was that one apparition that one night. The people had their hope restored after that. They had prayed together, they had felt joy, and at one point they even said, even if the Prussians are at our gate, we will not lose hope, And so Our Lady had revived the faith of the people there. 11 days later, the Prussian army had withdrawn and an armistice was signed. So it seems the prayers were answered and Our Lady of Peace had triumphed. Peace returned to that area. And the faith, it's still an ongoing battle, but the faith is still being restored. So it's an important message that we need to have peace in our hearts, we need to have hope, and we need to pray because God's very attentive to us and He's close. 2021 will be the 150th anniversary of this apparition, which took place in 1871. And so right now they are in the course of a 3-year Triduum of prayer, of preparation for that Jubilee. This year is dedicated to prayer, next year is dedicated to hope, and the following year is dedicated to Jesus, who shows His mercy, and it's tied into that message. Oh, but you must pray, because God will hear your prayers. And that gives us hope that God will hear our prayers, and Jesus will allow Himself to be touched, His heart to be touched. And so Jesus, the merciful one, wants to hear our prayers, and Mary wants to lead us to Jesus. So Our Lady of Pontmain, pray for us.